and tonight we're talking about Life of Brian from 1979, directed by Terry Jones. And here's a synopsis from Letterboxd. The tagline of the film: "He wasn't the Messiah, he was a very naughty boy." Brian Cohen is an average Jewish man, but through a series of ridiculous events, he gains a reputation as the Messiah. When he's not dodging his followers or being scolded by his shrill mother, the hapless Brian has to contend with the pompous Pontius Pilate and acronym-obsessed members of a separatist movement. Rife with Monty Python's signature absurdity, the tale finds Brian's life paralleling biblical lore, albeit with many more laughs. Yes. So
quite funny.
Yeah, it's some copy, all right. So Life of Brian is it's a Monty Python movie. It's their third theatrical movie they did after their much celebrated television show Flying Circus, which ran through the 70s. Their first movie, and now for something completely different. All they did pretty much was redo sketches, their most successful stuff from the Flying Circus show. And then they went and made that Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And that was like a huge hit. Super popular to this day. And then they went and made their third movie, which I believe Eric Idle initially pitched as Jesus Christ, something like Lust for Glory or something like that. Was the original pitch for it, and they're like, haha, isn't that funny? But then they kind of wound up making a movie that was Christ-like, because it would be so irreverent back in that period of time, the late 70s, getting a little saucy, taking on the Bible, people take so seriously. So I came to Monty Python as a whole concept, kind of I don't know. It was on syndication when I was a kid, and it was always kind of this weird, kind of like Doctor Who, as talked about earlier. But I knew it was a comedy show, so I remember trying to watch it at times. But it was just what is this British stuff? What is this all about? And so I never watched it. It was always I remember my parents always used to make some dismissive comments about Monty Python. Is this one guy that my dad worked with, he was a big British comedy fan. And they're like, oh yeah, he likes that British stuff, like Benny Hill and flying in the Flying Circus, and I don't get it. That's what my parents always said. I don't get it. And I was so that was kind of what I always heard was oh, that British stuff's weird. But and then I remember watching what was Holy Grail held up as one of the greatest comedies of all time. And my friend, I think Mike at the time, he had a copy of it, and I remember watching it when he was visiting one summer decades ago, and kind of being oh, what is this? This is kind of weird. There's funny bits in it and funny scenes, but I don't really get what this is all about. This doesn't feel like Dumb and Dumber at all. This this doesn't feel like Coneheads. This doesn't feel like Blank. It's not an American comedy. It's it looks dreary and kind of shitty and very what is this thing? It feels European. And so I was whatever, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I don't care. And then years later, once again, friend Corey, he was a fan of British stuff, and he had a little bit of a collection festering because the stuff was starting to come out on DVD. So he'd have Faulty Towers and Blackadder, and so he started acclimating me to this stuff and saying, oh, you should watch this. Oh, you should watch this one. And so I started feeling my way through it. And because there's sort of at times, particularly with some of the accents, there's not everyone sounds posh and stuff like that. There's things like that weird lower class gobbledygook, it sounds like, that the characters are saying. We're what the fuck did they just say? I need subtitles on. Yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of my initiation into British comedy and into a little bit of Monty Python. And I've only ever watched a little bit of Monty Python Flying Circus, not a ton of it, just to know it's oh, it's there, it's okay, I guess, it's funny at times. But most you go back and watch a lot of 70s comedies like Saturday Night Live, the stuff that's heralded as all-time brilliance of comedy. It's it's fine. It's there. It's not great. It's like people really love SCTV too. It's just like, yeah, it's not awesome or anything like that. So Life of Brian comes along, and I watched that movie. And I've always had like probably particularly around that time, I had like a interest in like Christendom and like religion, just because like I was working on being a like ardent atheist, and so something like Life of Brian was
one of those jerks.
One of those jerks. That was like, so this movie was like right up my alley. But like, yeah, I fucking love Life of Brian. I think this movie is like so good, and like it's been years since I'd watched it last, and I was kind of like, oh man, sometimes like there's been a few of these movies like The Night Porter, I'm like, yeah, I remember really liking that movie, and it's like, oh no, this isn't good at all. And watching this, I was like, nope, this movie's awesome. It's like it's Monty Python. There's a lot of wordplay. These guys are like super smart, clever people, and I think there is like, I don't know if you just get dropped into like Monty Python, I have no idea how someone's going to feel about this stuff, but like I've watched this movie quite a bit, and I've watched like now like probably I've watched all their movies, and I've watched a lot of British stuff, and I have a pretty good sense that this movie is pretty funny. And I basically just wrote a bunch of notes of my favorite gags and things that I'm like, oh man, I totally forgot about that. Again, there's no time code for me on this movie. It doesn't last long enough because it's a comedy for me. But I don't know, RJ. How did you feel about Life of Brian? I believe this was a rewatch for you, but was it a rewatch for you in the same sense that Dawn of the Dead was a movie that you had seen once when you were a little kid and you just didn't remember much of it at all, or what?
This one was a little bit more in my memory. It was, I would say this was a rewatch. I'd watched it a couple years ago.
Okay.
Where I sit with Monty Python, I watched that Holy Grail when I was younger, like probably younger to know what was funny at the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like you said, I was like 12 or something. And I was like, I don't really understand why this is funny, but whatever, it's funny. Haha.
Yep.
That kind of stuff.
The rabbit who kills people.
The rabbit.
The Black Knight.
Yeah, he's got no limbs. Super fun. So it was like kind of stuff like that. Where I am with Monty Python now is I like it. I think what they did was really cool. I think they're really smart guys. I think Monty Python is old person comedy. And I honestly, I like Life of Brian, but there was a lot of times where I was just like, ugh. I think it's some of the stuff is a little labored, and I think it's just kind of, I think it's not dated, because I think a lot of people still really like this stuff. I think for me personally, I've gotten past that point, and I don't like. I used to find some of that stuff funny, but I don't really anymore. And it sounds like I don't like this movie. I do. There's just a few things that I don't like. Where there's a few scenes that are a little much, I think. Like, I don't even remember what this was now. I watched this movie yesterday or 2 days ago, and I wrote down the master scene is a little much, and I don't remember what the master scene was. But then I also wrote down the biggest dickest scene is equally a little much. So it's like that. It's like that. Those scenes, and then like the scene where like the whole clan of people goes to Brian's window and they're just repeating stuff over and over again. It's stuff like that. At where I'm at now in my life, I'm just like, okay, I get it. Okay, come on. Come on. Like I think it goes a little long. So those are my criticisms, I guess. Is I think it's the humor appeals more to old people. And like I'm not young or anything like that, but I think it missed me. Where I think 80s kids really love this shit, and I'm a 90s kid, and I think it missed me. But I see where the humor is, and there was a lot of stuff that I was laughing at that I thought was really funny, like when they call Moses a Red Sea pedestrian, and like the snacks at the Coliseum and buying good stones for the stoning.
Mhm.
Like stuff like all that stuff I think is really funny, and I think it's pretty sharp satire. Um, and it's like what you were saying. I think they're really smart, and I like a lot of it. There are just a few things that I'm not my particular brand of humor, but I mean, what I think is funny is a little different from what a lot of people is funny. And Andrea said this the other day, where one time she told me that I laugh more at my own jokes than I laugh at anyone else's jokes, which is true. I think I'm funnier than anyone else. Not in like a dick way. Like, I just like my jokes better.
Mhm.
And then her example of one of my jokes was that it's like, if a guy was to tell me that he really loves carrots, I would be like, hey, this guy loves potatoes. Like, in a way like that, where it's like, I don't know why I think shit like that is really funny, but I do, and I feel like it's a little different. I feel like people don't really understand my humor sometimes. And now I'm just talking about myself. Anyways,
fine. But, okay, I'll say that, like, that's fine to do, because I mean, we're talking about comedy, and I think comedy is like one of the hardest things to like discuss, because like, I mean, I'm not I don't think of myself as a comedian at all. Like, I'm not that type of performer in my mind. Like, I don't think that way. I would say I have a dry sense of humor. So like,
I would agree on that.
This is like definitely and like wordplay and like the things that how people say it, that stuff, like, I find really funny. And I mean, like, I would definitely say that, yeah, like, I find like there's like, so even like in the field of like, say, British comedy, and this is like a thing that goes, this is like an argument that's been like held a lot, because sometimes like Monty Python just doesn't work for people, and there's like nothing you can do to change that. Like, it's just like, it either works for you, it doesn't, and there's like, it's super, like, it's a kind of agreed upon that it's subjective. So I mean, there's not much you can do. Like, it all depends on just like the type of person you are. So I mean, like, I'm not surprised that you didn't love Life of Brian. I'm kind of disappointed, because it means it's like less fun to talk about, because you're like not as into it as me. Because it's like it's like, hey man, wasn't that scene hilarious? Yeah, that was fine, I guess. Because I mean, Biggest Dick is hilarious, and just like the whole buildup of it, and just then the choice is he has a wife, and it's just like, it's like, because it's just like, oh god, and it just keeps going and going. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like the Biggest Dickest thing. I just think it runs long, and I know like that's what some people love, is like those humor, the bits that are like drawn out. I get that too, but it's kind of what you were saying, where comedy is hard to talk about. It's kind of like what I was saying with Spinal Tap.
Yeah, that's
because it's like, it's hard to
too.
talk about, because all I have written down was like the jokes that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm just here to tell you the jokes I like, it's one of those things. It's not as funny when you're telling someone what the joke is, instead of just experiencing it. So I don't know, Jer. Like, it's like, I like it, and like, I like Monty Python and stuff like that. I think it's funny. It was just, I don't know, man. I think it's like I said. I think it missed me. I don't know what it was. My era was all about the Pokemons and the Bill Cosbys,
the rapists,
and, stuff like that. So for whatever reason, I think
Bill Cosby's like older than this. Like,
no, I was just kidding. That was for some reason that was all that popped in my head.
I
think
because Ghost Dad, because you're
but that's my weird own obsession with Ghost Dad.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know, like, it's hard for me to talk about, because there are things that I really liked. It's like I said, I think they're really smart. I think their jokes are well written, and they obviously did like a lot of research to like write the script. Like, I feel like they like have the way the scenes are, not the scenes, the landscapes and how things look. I think they did really well. Things like that, and like the way they talk about stuff.
Yeah, so they shot in Tunisia, which is like where they shot, like, it was like a bio, like, well, Jesus of Nazareth had just been shot there like a year earlier, so they just reused the same like place and the same sites and stuff like that. So they just redressed it, and some of like my favorite stuff when I watch this movie is like, so Terry Jones directed this movie, but Terry Gilliam, like, because they worked on like Holy Grail together. And then for this time, they agreed, it's best if we don't work together because it slows everything down. And so Terry Gilliam's like thing was he was in charge of like production design. So like all the great attention to detail, like just limbs and bodies and the filthiness of like living in like 33 AD. It's all there, and like there's like the crucifixion, like you see like these like old bodies like just left up on the crucifixion, and like just like shitty beards and grossness. It's all like that's Terry Gilliam there, and I mean that's like his love of like Pasolini and Fellini and like real like Criterion type of movies. Like he was all about that, and he brings that into this to give it that authenticity.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Like stuff like that I thought was really good. And it's like I was saying, I just think that shows that their attention to things, I guess, or it's like I said, I think they are smart guys. And I do like a lot of the the jokes.
Oxford boys.
Yeah. My favorite my favorite line was when they are talking about their big sabotage plot when they're like raiding the thing.
Yep.
And he's like, if anybody asks, we're sewage workers on our way to a conference. And I thought that was actually really fucking funny.
Because it's about poop.
Well, no, just the idea where it's just like, if anyone asks, we're sewage workers on the way to a conference. And it's like, what conference? So I thought that was particularly very funny. And it's like I said, like I like a lot of it. Fake beards. When that guy says he's talking about nose city because he's talking to like Jewish people and he's talking about huge noses.
Big nose.
And it's like I was saying, like the gladiator snacks, just the way they talk about things in a
aardvark snouts.
Yeah, exactly. No, the way they talk about things where it's one of those things too where it's not like an over analyzing of situations, but it's like when people like go a little bit more into things than they need to. Like I like that kind of humor, but I feel like that also fits in with the extended gag, like I was talking about, that I don't like, where scenes drag on. So I don't know, it's a fine line for me because I feel like those things go hand in hand, where people who like one like the other, and they're just like, yeah, this movie's an all-time banger. But for me, I don't know, dude. I thought I would like it more than I did, and I don't really know why I didn't like it more. I thought it was funny, but there were a lot of times that I kind of just drifted. Like honestly, my timestamp, I didn't write it down, but it was probably like 25 minutes, maybe half an hour. Yeah, because I was just like, man, how much have I watched of this movie? So like I don't know what it is. It's kind of like what we said. I think we talked about this in Spinal Tap. Even it's just comedy. Even if it's great comedy, I feel like not dated or aging, but I think for generations it may stick with some people more than others, and that's a very vague way of me saying that I didn't love it. I liked it, but and as an excuse, it's like I feel like it's a generational thing, which is maybe not true because I'm sure there's guys my age who fucking love this movie. But,
well, no, there for sure there is. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with age per se. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the Marx Brothers are hilarious. Like they're like, and that's like the fucking 30s. So I don't know. Laurel and Hardy are great. Chaplin's great. Keaton's great. If I wanted to like pick on somebody that I'm like, I don't get it, Jerry Lewis, I fucking hate Jerry Lewis.
Oh,
he's garbage. But people loved him. But I can't stand that crap. It's like, it's just painful. I hate his characters. He just is the worst. And like, even like Mel Brooks movies, I don't like Mel Brooks.
Actually, that's a perfect fucking example. 'Cause that's another of these all-time classic comedies that I don't really get. So sorry, I cut you off, but like I feel the same. I feel worse about Mel Brooks movies than I do Monty Python, because I do like Monty Python and I do think they're funny. I just don't love them like a lot of people do. And it's the same with Mel Brooks movies, where it's like I watch them and it's like it's fine, but it's like I'm not fucking busting a gut. I'm not. It's not a knee slapper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so yeah, I cut you off, but I think that's a great example for my argument
because
here.
like things like young Frank. Well, no, I mean, I don't
right?
even think it's not even an argument. I think it's just like it goes back to like 'cause comedy is so subjective, and it's just like going to work
Right.
or not. Like, cause like yeah, let's say with Mel Brooks, like Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, The Producers, like those are like kind of like the ones that like people will say, oh no, if you may not like Spaceballs, you might not like Dracula Dead and
Yeah.
Loving It, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, but you'll fucking love these three. And it's always like, nah, I watched those movies. Young Frankenstein's so fucking boring to me. Blazing Saddles is I got a couple of really funny moments, but for the most part, it's just like, oh yeah, nothing special. And The Producers, I've never like particularly cared for.
Hmm.
But like, so I mean, it's weird because there's like people that would swear up and down it's like these were the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life, and then I'll be like, well, Dumb and Dumber actually is like one of the best movies I've ever seen, and like it's for
It is.
comedy, but there's people that like genuinely will just be like, meh. There's a
Hmm.
time and place, and I think like when you watch stuff when you're like at a particular age is really going to define so much of your like sense of comedy and humor,
Hmm.
and like you have to like get that in there then and there, or work toward it and watch and work at it and like go out of your way to like watch more and more
Right.
comedy to like get into it, I guess. But I
I
don't know.
no, I think you nailed it on the head there. Where it's just like when you watch it at a certain age, it kind of like some of the old comedies that I love. Like my favorite old comedies are ones that I watched when I was really young.
Mm.
Where I didn't talk about it this week, I will next week. But I watched some Pauly Shore movies,
Yeah.
and people fucking hate Pauly Shore a lot. But I really like those movies because I watched them when I was a little kid, and
Mhm.
like, I'll give you the full rundown another
Okay.
time
Yeah.
because this isn't the Pauly Shore show. But it's like I think it fits in that where it's like sometimes movies that I saw when I was really young, they stick with me a lot better than other ones.
Yeah.
And you know what? Talking about Mel Brooks, you know what movies I like of Mel Brooks?
Hmm.
Robin Hood, Men in Tights, and fucking Dracula Dead and Loving It. Not Spaceballs. Spaceballs sucks. No, not sucks, but whatever. I don't much care for Blazing Saddles. I don't think it's that great.
Hmm.
Not that it's not great, but it's like I said, I don't really it's not my kind of humor, so whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our big comedy talk.
Big comedy,
So
yeah.
things I like about this movie.
Yeah, lay it on me.
So Terry Jones' drag is just hilarious to me. It's like because it's
Yeah.
like he's like the most least convincing women you could imagine, because he just
Hmm.
like does it like his screechy horrible voice, like he's just like the ugliest type of woman, like the form of femininity you can imagine, and of course it's a man
Right.
doing it, so it's like this like horrific like crone cliche that like it's just so funny because he
Hmm.
just goes so far with it. We get great lines and plays on words like with homage. We come to pay homage, keep that away from me, pervert. I think that's hilarious. And then you get Terry Jones asking the question we've all been asking: what is myrrh anyway? It's like
Yeah.
that's a good question. What is myrrh? Things smell like it, and it's useless. We get the
Hmm.
great play on words of bomb and bomb, which is
Hmm.
like always been like, yeah, those words do sound a lot alike. And
Hmm.
if you don't write them out, they can be very confusing.
Right.
We get Brian's song, a great James Bond
Right.
send up with some Terry Gilliam animation. And
Hmm.
essentially, the movie plays out immediately that we're getting the B story of Christ. We get the Sermon at the Mount,
Yeah.
which I think is like played awesomely with the giant pullout from the mound, where you're hearing the words, and it goes further and further, and it plays with the simple idea like, wait, the people in the back wouldn't have been able to hear him. There was no sound system, and like
Yeah.
people would be like, well, what did he say? And like that's like exactly how it would play.
Yep.
It's like fantastic. It's like, yep, that's what people would just be like. Oh, I think he's blessed are the cheesemakers.
The cheese makers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that stuff was good. Oh, one other thing I actually really like, Jared, is I like how they all play like 15 different roles,
Oh fuck yeah.
and even like to each other at like a couple points where it's the same actor talking to the same actor but in different costumes.
Mhm.
I do think that is really funny. I like
Yeah,
that.
well, I love that. Like, yeah, characters will literally leave the scene and then they'll be replaced by the same actors playing their own roles. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, they didn't have to do that, but it's like that's the gimmick. It's a sketch comedy troupe, even though they have like a larger scale and scope to their productions. It's like, no, we're just going to stick to like, we need John Cleese is the authoritative character because he's the biggest. That's like, and he has like the best voice to do it because he sounds like a dick, and he plays straight man very, very well, but he can also play an idiot really, really well too. I think this is one of the greatest explorations of biblical times I've ever seen. But we'll be seeing another one like in a few weeks with Last Temptation of Christ.
With the sexiest interpretation of Jesus H. Christ you've ever seen.
With Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an exploration of the horror of being stoned to death, while like making it like it's just like, oh, it's funny, and it's like because you always hear about that idea of like, oh, being stoned to death. Well, it doesn't sound so bad, and I don't know. There's like, I don't know, the anachronisms are really good. Like, I mean, it's all like part of the joke of it. Like just how British everybody is. Like, oh, that'd be nice. She's such a touching girl. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to keep the British accent shit to a minimum because it's like, it's really easy to want to do that when you're talking about British comedy, and it's cringy and it's bad. So I'm trying to keep it in check. And yeah, just like how bloodthirsty the women are. I think that's cute. Yeah. It's a nice little bit, and they're doing their high pitched voice, and they're, oh no, I'm a man. It's good. It's like it's because it's playing on what they do, what they've always done. When they need women, they do it. And here it's like, well, it's funnier if it's actually women playing men. Yeah, crucified bodies note. The idea of an ex-leper. I remember like the first time I ever watched this, I was like, what? Like, because I don't know if I knew what a leper was, or I didn't understand what Michael Palin was saying. I was like, what's ex-leper, and why is he like, is he a leaper? Like, is that the joke? He's a leaper and not a leper? But it's like, oh no, he got better, and he still is like, well, I can't find work still, so he's a perfectly abled panhandler who just wants money.
Well, I like that. Michael Palin's wicked in this movie.
Yep. Oh, I think they're all
good.
Yeah, they're all pretty good.
They're all good.
And then, I love that just the whole thing of Mr. Cohen is not your father. I don't know, it's like Cohen's such like a hilariously Jewish name. So, and like seriously, it's like considering like the era that this movie came out of, this movie's like fairly like, I don't know. So, okay, we didn't even touched upon this whole thing. Like, so this movie was like blasphemous when it came out, or deemed blasphemous by people who never watched it, saying, oh, this is outrageous, you can't talk about Christ this way. And it's like, no, they actually don't. Like, in fact, they actually like pretty well chalk up the ideas of like, yeah, all of Christ's stuff was like actually common sense that we should all practice, like treating people well. What a novel idea. And just the idea that this movie's like nasty or mean, it's like, no, like Christ, like this movie's got a Christ, it's got a like I guess like an early like transgender character in it, and it's done and it's like pretty damn tastefully. Like they're very respectful of Loretta, and it's like, wow, like when that first popped up, I was kind of like getting ready for like, oh god, I don't remember where this goes, oh Jesus. And then it's like, oh no, that's actually pretty smart. Just the absurdity of like, you can't have children, but we will defend the right that you can have children in principle. It's like it's good. And then Nautius Maximus. I mean, it's like you gotta do those Roman jokes. And then we cut to the Colosseum with like dismembered bodies and parts, and the title comes up, Children's Matinee. That's hilarious. That's UHF quality humor, RJ.
Yeah, that's up there.
Yeah, and then we get to deal with the issue, the how the left politically devours itself and cannot agree on what its message is, which some people would say is a problem that plagues the left in 2017. But here it is in the 1970s, talked about in terms of of 33 AD. Here with the People's Front of Judea. It's like, are you the Judean People's Front? Fuck off. So good. One of the things I mentioned later on, but I'll just mention it here, is I absolutely I think like the thing that appeals to me so much with like Monty Python is like indignation in all the characters. Like everybody just so sensitive and like thin-skinned and like easily offended. Like everything you can say is just like, what did you say? What do you mean? It's like, I fucking love it. It's like it brings like so much comedy and like just frustration and anger with people. And it's like when you have a nice person who has to deal with that, it just keeps escalating. It's a great formula for comedy. And they do it. That's like their whole shtick, actually.
Mhm.
And then, of course, there's the brilliant scene of what have the Romans ever done for us, which I think is really, really good and timeless. Just
Mhm.
all these things, it's like, well, what have they really done for us? And then an example, the aqueducts. That was like my first introduction to the word aqueduct was from this movie. I had no idea what an aqueduct was, and it's
And
like that's exactly what the Romans invented. It was the aqueducts, and now they have them.
yeah, and then young Jarrett took off to the library with a piece of scribe with aqueduct written on it, and
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "I will find out what this means."
It's like some sort of like duck animal, like the water duck. Is it duck or
Yeah,
what?
the aqueduct.
That seems like redundant. Like ducks are aquatic,
I don't know what ducks you're hanging out
mammalian.
with.
Yeah. Yep. And I love that Terry Gilliam always wants to play the filthiest men because he
Oh,
plays.
I did like that. Yeah.
Like he's like fucking he's like ass in his like little dirty smelly underwear and he's just like hunchback or whatever. I think he was the mad jailer. I think this is credit. He is like, oh fuck, I just love his grunts and sounds, and later on he has like some of the fucking best lines of like all time.
Mhm.
And then, like, the man shackled to the wall, he basically reminds me of Twitter users who talk about politics. Just, like,
Yeah.
talk about, like, people who defend, like, the police when they, like, have murdered black people. And they're like, oh, you have
Mhm.
no idea how great it was. You just, it was like this. There's people like this. They're just, like, you can't argue with because they just, like, they're broken.
Mhm.
They're hopeless. And it's like, so that's good. That's good Michael Palin right there. And then when Brian gets brought before Pontius Pilate with his lisp, we get the funniest thing amongst biggest dickus is John Cleese slapping Brian in the head. Like it's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's so fucking like because there's times where they even do like a jump cut because they might have missed it and they had to make it
Mhm.
connect, or they added a jump cut to make it even funnier. I
Mhm.
just fucking like love it and throwing him to the ground and just like the ridiculous like how Brian wants to correct pilots like
Yeah.
his speech impediment and he just like gets slapped around for it. It's like I don't know. It's I can see that being like some people not people's speed, but I don't know for me.
I like that one actually. That's one I did like. The jump cut that you talk about.
Yeah.
I noticed that too, and I was like, oh, I like that. That's funny.
Yeah.
I like when they do that.
And then we get the escape. We get the alien sequence,
Yeah.
which I read on Wikipedia. George Lucas gave him props for. He thought it was amazing. I don't know.
Why?
I don't fucking know. I think the alien scene's it's dumb humor. Like it,
Yeah.
but I think they're okay with that. Like they're truly like, okay, what does he
Yeah,
do?
they don't
How
care.
how do we get out of the situation where he's in the like he's in the Pontius's like palace. Like, how would he escape? Well, he climbs up a tallest point, he falls off, and then an alien ship picks him up and drops him off safely, and the pursuit continues. Like, that's it. That's all they thought of. And he's like, who gives a shit? It's fucking movies. It's a comedy. We get the haggling scene. The haggling scene is Eric Idle.
Yeah.
It's like it's fine. It's like not bad. It's absurd. Again, it's the indignation thing, but it's like whatever. It's like not awesome jokes or anything like that. It's
Right.
just there. But I absolutely love the multiple prophets of the time thing. It always brings me back to like one of my favorite like unexplored eras of like American history, which is like kind of like the revival era of like the 1820s, where like there was like just like this idea of like hundreds of guys going out into like the west of like America unexplored, and they're like, come follow me, followers. I've got the ear to God that I'm going to give to you. And just the
Right.
idea that like that people would operate that way and be like, yeah, I think this smelly old fucking hobo is going to like has got the right idea and he's going to save us all.
Yeah.
Like I love that
Hey,
stuff.
Jarrett,
Yo,
can I cut you in on a hot secret?
sure.
People still walk around like smelly old hobos and say that they have the ear of God.
But it's even like that era though, where it was like en masse, like it was like unprecedented
Yeah,
levels.
no,
and,
you're right,
And people
yeah.
would pick up and leave and like resettle. I mean, the Mormon religion is like the most successful version of that. Like it is. Like
Yep.
it was like completely when everyone says Joseph Smith was the prophet. It's like, well, he was like one of like hundreds of guys, and all the other ones failed and they all probably wound up dead and dying and starving and like going back to normal life. But like I find that era just like really weird because it's also like they're going into a world where it's like, oh, it's like medieval times for all purposes. Like there's no electricity when you're going out west. You're on your own. There's no food. And there's like, oh, there's like inhabitants that are there before you and they don't want you there. I don't know. I think it's awesome. And so like this is like a comedy version of that, and just the absurdity of like who's got the best gimmick, who's shoutier, who's got like the best sales pitch.
Right.
Really good. And then I think before we get to the real sequence of when Brian becomes the prophet in that bit, there's when he's hiding out at the People's Front of Judea thing with all the Roman soldiers doing one of your favorite things, time lapse, when they all run in and out. One of your favorites. I thought of you when that happened because you always complain about it. Here, I don't know, we got Spike Milligan, who's like, I'm not sure if you're familiar. So he's like the old like contrarian old man who says could be worse, and he's like no selling John Cleese like in all his scenes, like he's gonna get stoned to death, and he somehow survived that whole bit because I guess the priest got stoned to death himself. That's Spike Milligan, who's like one of the I'm trying to remember the name. They were like the comedy group that like birthed like the Flying Circus stuff, like the Monty Python stuff. Like they were like the guys that were like looked up to as like the comedy godfathers of Britain. And then there's like the next generation where like again I'm blanking on their names and Steven's gonna give me shit, but it's like the guys who were in Bedazzled, the
Brendan Fraser one?
Yeah, Brendan Fraser the first. They're like the next gen, and then it was like the Pythons that carried on that tradition of like this sort of like sitcom comedy, I guess. And that's Spike Milligan doing those bits, and he's pretty good in this. But anyway, so back to Brian. He gets dropped out of the sky into the place of one of the prophets, and he has to start doing his like riff to make himself look like a prophet. And there's like the one like fucking like weird degenerate character who's like, "That's an ice god." I fucking love like how he's trying to keep up this thing, and everyone keeps like trying to like sideswipe him and like just like waylay his like efforts, and like, don't you want to haggle? What's wrong with it then? Like I just love like how just like the scene just keeps building and building, and like I'm worried about what you've got against the birds. Like I fucking
I thought that was funny.
That whole sequence is like I fucking love it. Like it's so good. He's making it up as he goes along. I think about that all the time. Like just his like John Cleese's reading of that is so goddamn good. And and then from that point, like when people start like he starts talking complete sense, and he's like, oh, he's just saying stuff that like would just make life better, and you don't have to be religious. These are just like tips for life. Treat people well, and like think for yourself. And everyone's like, wow, he's like the Messiah, I think. And then you get the whole chase of him running away from them, but then you get the comedic genius of having a guy who is trying to hide after jumping on the foot of a mute who lives in a hole and whose vow has been inadvertently broken because he just yelped out in pain from his foot being jumped on, wants to jump and scream and sing. That is so fucking good to me. Like just like the thought of doing that whole sequence. So like that's how they figured out, like then he fucks this guy's poor life up because he sends people to eat his juniper berries, and they all go do that, and he's like, what the fuck, he just ate his juniper berries, you're ruining my life. Like I've been silent for 18 years. And then he starts like strangling Brian, and he's like, he's the Messiah. No, he's not. And he goes back to strangling him, and then they take him away and they kill him off screen. And it's like, wow, Brian just ruined this man's life. And it's like a, I don't know, 5-minute scene, and it's just like, wow, just like I can't even imagine in my life thinking of something like that, like clever and like well planned. And I can't think of like seeing anything like that in any comedy. Like it's so good, it pays off so well. And then, of course, we got, I am the Messiah, now fuck off. And how should we fuck off, Lord? Of course, there's also Terry Jones's little furry ball sack when he's like the old man.
Oh, yeah.
So again, Terry Jones is like so fucking funny in this. We are your favorite bit. Yes, we are all individuals. And then, of course, I think probably more than any other line in this movie, now that I got to it, John Cleese, when he just grabs Brian and says, "You're fucking nicked me, old beauty," I think about that way too much, and I kind of have forgotten what movie it was from. And then watching this, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Life of Brian. I love that. He's like how proud he is of himself of catching him, and it's just like and it's just like it's like the slam cut of him just like being there and just grabbing him and just like there he is, and he's so happy. He's like he didn't even like chase after him. He just appeared, and that's it. We get the continued hilarity of speech impediments because speech impediments are funny.
Yeah.
We get the
hey, Jarrett. When I was a little kid, I had a speech impediment.
Me too.
Look at that. Look at how our lives have come into crossed paths.
Some people who listen to this podcast would probably say, "Hey, Jarrett still has a speech impediment." Yeah. Then there is the apologetic, conflicted Roman soldier in charge of crucifixion. I thought that's very, very charming. Just he's so like
crucifixion. Yes,
good. Yeah, good. And then we get the return of the mad jailer, like when he comes up to Eric Idle's character, who's like, "Oh no, freedom, what?" And like he's just having a laugh with him, just kidding, even though he could have actually just left, and he's like totally okay with that. And just like Terry Gilliam's faces of like, "What? He's free?" But then we get, just like the fucking scene with like him looking through the charts and talking about all this senseless death. And then you have the other mad Eric Idle stutterer. And then you have the mad jailer just like, and then we get his other scene where he goes, "We've got lumps of it round the back." Which, like, I don't even know how the fuck anyone would have ever thought of that. Is like, that's what I need to say in that scene, is the fact that he's simple and dumb. He doesn't know what he's saying. But lumps of what? It's like, god damn it. Fuck, this movie is so goddamn good. And I'll conclude my monologue here with saying, always look on the bright side of life.
I think that's the message they were trying to say, you know, and I think that's a good one to follow. Just look on the bright side.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think you summed it up pretty good, to be honest. Yeah. I honestly, I think these comedy movies, we've only had 2. I think they're kind of hard to talk about. So I think you did a good job. Good job, Jarrett.
Well, just recapping the stuff I thought was funny. Yeah.
Well, see, that's what I mean. It's like I have a hard time doing that, though, because I've been told what I think is funny is very different from what other people think is funny. So I don't know. Next time I'll take better notes and I'll tell you exactly what. But I love that line, man. If anyone stops us, we're sewage workers on the way to a conference. I thought that was really good. So my ending note, I guess.
Well, RJ, there are some people who hate this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Adam Waldowski, he gave this movie 1.5 stars. The manic madcap troupe relies on gags and sketch comedy so tiresome that the 94-minute runtime stretches into eternity. Several bits, such as a gag about haggling for a lower market price, would hardly be funny at an amateur improv night. Instead of biting or clever commentary on religion generally or Christianity specifically, the jokes here are only occasionally shocking and almost never amusing. One star here from Chronic. 3 out of 10. I get the sense that this movie is what it is. But
that's the most honest review I've ever heard.
But I couldn't watch it to the end. Nothing against old movies, but after the modern day standards that I get used to, it's just horrible to watch.
I like this guy. He seems fun.
Yeah, Steven Savona, 1.5 stars. I think I once heard someone describe this as 94 minutes of beige. I wholeheartedly agree. The jokes can't make up for how unappealing this is to the eye. Which brings up an interesting thing. So my friend Mike, he posted on Facebook a question about like what are like some modern comedy movies that have been released in the last 20 years that you could describe as cinematic, in the sense that like one talks about like Alfred Hitchcock or Spielberg. Like what are what are cinematic modern comedies, and it's like
Right.
we had there's a lot of people responding to this like thread of people,
Mm-hmm.
and like the one that pops to my mind is something like Big Lebowski or like Coen Brothers comedies. Those movies are
Yeah.
pretty visually striking, like and
Mm-hmm.
then of course like a lot of people are suggesting stuff that's like kind of like I don't know, 21 Jump Street, or like kind of these things where it's like, well, these are like genre parodies, or they're like even like I think I even mentioned even Pop Star is something else I suggested, but it's like that's also a kind of a genre parody. Like so like the idea of like what these like sort of behind the scenes like super produced musician documentaries look like. They're usually quite nice looking, and like
Yeah.
they strive for like a certain type of beauty, and that movie definitely does that because Brandon Truss shot it and he's really good at shooting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like generally speaking, it seems like the default look of comedy is like bland and like reality. It just replicates the style of reality that looks like movie reality, and that's it. Like you don't want anything, you don't want no flair. But like at the same time, it's like a lot of cinema comes down to editing, and like I think so much of like comedy comes down to editing at times, depending on the
Right.
sort of comedy you're doing, like reaction shots, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I thought it's like I think it's the idea that this movie is 94 minutes of beige. It's kind of like, well, if you're not enjoying this movie, that's like an easy thing you can complain about. But
Right.
like for the most part, I mean, like they shot it in like a desert. Like they actually shot on location. And like that area, that part of the world is beige and brown, and I mean that's like kind of what those
Yeah.
movies look like. That is the look of like Pasolini movies. That is the look of like. Um, of like those period pieces is brown, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean like I remember like even like when I think of like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's like it looks like a European like uh Robin and Marianne or type of movie. Like it looks like a period piece, and that's like they wanted to look that way, and then it's like absurd that
Mm-hmm.
they're doing a comedy set in a movie that looks that way. So I say sucks to that comment.
Yeah. I kind of I do agree with you.
Hmm.
That guy sucks.
Yeah.
That guy sucks.
Oh man, so this is like a really long episode, RJ.
This is one of the longest ones ever, and it's not even because we talked about the movie that much.
No, we talked about so many things.
Yeah.
Well, I think let's end it there.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I guess.
After the break, we're gonna wash up. It's hot up in here, it's smoky. Got a lot of ash in our faces and sweating our balls off here.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. After the break, I don't know. Get crucified. That's nice and obvious, right?
That sounds okay for me, though.